Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 3, Episode 22, The Parking Space. Oh, hello everyone. How's everyone doing? I hope you're doing so well. I'm doing all right. A couple things before we get into the episode. I wanted to mention that the podcast that I recorded with a couple of friends of mine, Amanda and Wade, their amazing podcast, Don't Worry, Be Movies, the episode where I was lucky enough to be a guest, is out now. So I encourage you to listen to their podcast, listen to the episode where I discuss Contact from 1997, the movie Contact with them, but also listen to all their episodes. They are fantastic, so funny together. They even sing their own theme song. I'm a little bit envious of that. It's got me thinking, do I sing? No, I'm not going to subject you guys to that, but they do, and it's adorable, and they do such a great job. But anyway, Don't Worry, Be Movies, the episode that I was a part of, my name's in the title, so you should be able to find it easily. But again, they've done a bunch of episodes covering really funny movies and really amazing movies. So I highly recommend that podcast. And another thing I wanted to mention, important to this podcast, I feel like my inner Elaine came out a few days ago. And what happened, my family and I, last weekend, we went to a production of The Wizard of Oz in our local town theater. And so we were sitting in the second row, and, well, this woman in front of us, so yes, in the front row, she was on her phone, just scrolling Facebook during the performance. It was obnoxious. I didn't see it right away, but my husband nudged me 4 minutes into the beginning of the play. I look over and I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, in the front row, I cannot stress that enough. And just being on stage for various things in my life, you can see people in the front row, okay? I mean, it's rude no matter what, but the fact that she was so brazen to just lean back in her chair like she's at home watching something on TV and just mindlessly scrolling Facebook, it was amazing. Anyway, we were annoyed, but you know what? We kept focus and we're enjoying the production. I let it go and I let it go. And then into the second act. Yeah, I mean, I let it go throughout the first act. Intermission happened. It was probably 10 minutes into the second act. All the actors, so all the main characters, Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion, were like right in front of us on the stage, at the edge of the stage. And she lifts up her phone again to no doubt do the same thing she's been doing, which was, first of all, it's not like she was just scrolling Facebook. Like, she kept going to one picture on Facebook, scrolling to see if there were any new comments, then tapping on the likes. I mean, it should just give you an idea of how many times she was doing this, because I know what she was doing. Like, I could see, and it was like obsessive. It was like the same thing over and over again. I'm like, yeah, I don't think this is urgent. I don't think you need to be doing this in a theater right in front of the actors. So anyway, she is on her phone and I just feel it bubbling up. I'm like, nope, it's not going to stop. I'm going to do it. I'm doing it. I lean over and I say, excuse me, it's very distracting that you're on your phone. Can you please stop? She kind of gives me this look and then puts her phone down. Happy to report she never picked it up again, never looked at it again. I'm the type of person, I don't love conflict or confrontation. So when I have these moments, it's kind of surprising, but I'm also like really proud of myself for speaking up. I mean, it's a little thing. It's not like I did something for social justice or anything. I'm not tooting my horn that hard, but I'm hoping that my little confrontation with her makes her think twice the next time she's in a theater and just wants to look at her phone the whole time. Oh my gosh. Well, the funniest part too is after I said this to her, I glance over at my husband. His eyes are the size of saucers and he's like darting back and forth between her and me. And I'm like, are you afraid? Like, I think he thought maybe she was going to throw down. I knew she wouldn't. I kind of sensed her vibe. She was harmless, but yeah, I couldn't take it anymore. I'm like, these actors are working so hard and they're performing their hearts out. And you have the audacity to sit in the front row on your phone. I don't understand people. They're the worst. Anyway, so I feel like my inner Elaine came out, like I was reminded of when she was in the theater and she shushes the woman. You talking? Well, it's the previews. This wasn't during the previews. This woman was on her phone during the show. So I really feel like Elaine Benes was channeled through me, and she would be proud of what I did. All right, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for this episode from my coffee table book is as follows. Jerry learns that his friend Mike thinks he's a phony, then watches as George and Mike fight over who is entitled to a parking space in front of Jerry's building. The standoff continues into the night, and a debate develops with the entire neighborhood taking sides as to whether parking priority should be to the person backing in or the one pulling in. Wow, some of these synopses are not great. This episode was written by Larry David and Greg Daniels. I got very excited when I saw that Greg Daniels was the co-writer. So for those of you who might not be familiar, Greg Daniels is a huge name in television now. Back then, he was, I think, a writer-producer on Seinfeld. Then he went on to work on King of the Hill. But I think what he's best known for is being the creator of The American Office, one of my favorite shows. And so this was the only Seinfeld episode he was involved in. And it was funny, he was mentioned in the commentary. Tom Sharonis and Tom Azzari did the commentary for this episode. And so they mentioned, oh yeah, Greg Daniels, now he's got this new show called The Office. Makes sense. The commentary, I think, was done around 2003, and that's around when they were developing The Office. So yeah, I just thought that was funny. Like, a little moment in time before The Office became like one of the biggest shows in television history. Another weird coincidence. I listen to the Office Ladies podcast. It's hosted by Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey, who played Pam and Angela on the show. And on this particular episode, Greg Daniels was a guest. During the interview, he actually referenced an episode of Seinfeld he pitched that never got produced. I guess it's not a whole episode, but a storyline for George. So I just wanted to mention what he talked about because it was pretty interesting and I think pretty funny. He had pitched a story where George frightens a beautiful woman in a phone booth. George has a ski mask on and he goes up to the phone booth, and apparently she gets scared and runs off because he has a ski mask on, but he's only wearing it because it's very cold out. And she leaves her filofax behind. Is this a little bit dated? Phone booth, filofax. Anyway, so he takes the filofax and he's like, I'm going to call the people here and try and track her down so I can meet her. And then she'll really like me because I helped her find her filofax. Well, turns out every woman he calls from the filofax ends up being this gorgeous friend of the original woman. So he feels like he's got the holy grail of beautiful women with this filofax, and he keeps calling, and he doesn't give it back. He doesn't even ask about this other woman. He just keeps calling these women and meeting up with them for dates because it's just, again, the holy grail of hot ladies. Anyway, I thought that was a funny pitch. That would have been fun to see. All right, so let's start getting into the episode. First scene, we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer enters, tells Jerry, your car's been stolen, buddy. Jerry's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I just saw it. I know where you parked it. It's gone. He's like, oh, no, I know. Kramer's like, oh, well, how do you know? And then Jerry goes into this whole kind of teasing Kramer, like, you always have to know what's going on. If I don't tell you, it's going to drive you crazy. He makes Kramer beg. He tells him the first beg wasn't great. He needs to really put some beg into it. Anyway, we get through all of that, and Jerry reveals, I lent the car to George. He and Elaine went to a flea market, okay? Well, Kramer asks, why did they ask me to go? I don't know. Well, they don't like me? I don't like ya. Kramer feels snubbed. Poor guy. The next scene is in Jerry's car. George and Elaine are driving back from the flea market. And George loves this hat he bought. Oh, bald people, they just look good in hats. Elaine mentions in the 20s and 30s, men wore hats all the time. Oh, what a bald paradise. And then Elaine says, well, I mean, you could do it now. Who's stopping you? What if he meets a woman? The first time he takes it off, that look of disappointment, oh, he couldn't take that. It would be brutal. Elaine is wearing a pair of sunglasses that she got from the flea market. She's not sure if she really likes them, so she moves the rearview mirror to take a look and see how she looks in them, which causes George to swerve violently, and that's where the scene ends. The purpose of this scene, we're showing the beginning of George and Elaine's storyline. In my take, I love this bald people in hats conversation. It just feels so Larry David, especially when George says, "Oh, what a bald paradise." And I also love what George says when Elaine says, "Hey, you could wear hats all the time now. Who's stopping you?" He has that wherewithal of like, "No, I can't do that because eventually I'm going to have to take it off, especially if I meet a woman." He's bracing for that disappointment all the time. That would be worse. And this got me thinking about, some friends of mine, some male friends of mine who have adopted this hat all the time option because they have a receding hairline or they're bald or going bald, whatever it is. And I'm not talking a stylish hat. I'm talking a baseball cap. A lot of times like old gross baseball hats too. And it's like, you're not fooling anyone. The fact that you wear the hat all the time, it's pretty obvious. And look, these are friends of mine. These men are well into their 40s now. It was bad enough when they did it in their 30s, to be honest. But God, just accept it. Expose your baldness. No one cares. So I admire George for being this self-aware and realizing, no, the repercussions of just wearing a hat all the time would be really pathetic. All right, I gotta call Elaine out here. Why the hell does she have to use the rear view mirror to look at the sunglasses? I don't understand this at all. I'm sure there are vanity mirrors in that BMW right in front of you, Elaine. So yeah, I feel like the way they needed to get to this plot of George swerving and then the car making noise, it felt a little bit messy. I don't know. There could have been a different way. I like the whole rear view mirror thing getting like askew, but maybe she bumps into it. Maybe she takes something out of a bag she has and like knocks it, or I don't know. But like the pulling it to look at her reflection, come on. Our Elaine is smarter than that. The next scene, we're back at Jerry's apartment. Kramer's still upset, and they should know better. You don't want to get on his bad side. I mean, people have problems if he doesn't like them. Jerry is setting up a bunch of snacks and drinks. It looks like he's hosting a little party to watch a fight. And then Kramer says, "Oh, I invited Mike Moffat. You don't mind?" He's like, No, I like Mike." And Kramer teases that, we just talked and he had some interesting things to say about you, Jerry. And then there's a little bit of payback here. Jerry's wondering what Mike said. Well, Kramer needs Jerry to beg now. Finally, he tells Jerry that Mike thinks he's a phony. He thinks I'm a phony? Big phony. Big. Of course Jerry's upset. "Why'd you tell me that if I can't say anything?" "You begged me." All right, now we're back at Jerry's car. Oh God, it doesn't sound good. The car is making clanking sounds. And George blames Elaine because she moved the mirror, threw off his equilibrium. Elaine's like, "Come on, don't blame me because you're a bad driver, George." George takes great offense to this. No one drives like me. No one. They're nervous now. What are they going to tell Jerry? Well, they're approaching Jerry's building, so George asks Elaine to start looking for spaces. She says it's impossible. Just park it in a garage. George is vehemently against this. And even when Elaine offers to pay, he just says no, he has a system. They can't park in a garage. It's just a sickness in his family. They're just so cheap. And it's like going to a prostitute. Elaine just whips her head. What? If I apply myself, maybe I could get it for free. Then Elaine sees a spot. It's the dream space right in front of Jerry's building. George is ecstatic and Elaine makes a little joke. You didn't even have to take it to dinner. George takes a little time to prep Elaine here. Now you're going to see some parallel parking. He wishes you could make a living doing this. It's all geometry. Elaine's getting tired of this. "Just park it already." And he says, I can't even pass it on to you. It's a shame. All of a sudden, George sees another car trying to pull in. And he confronts this guy. And then they get into it. George accuses him of sneaking into his spot. And he says, "I wasn't sneaking. You were just sitting there." And then there's this whole debate, backing in versus pulling in head first. This whole discussion happens. Elaine approaches them and tells George, "Just put it in a garage." Of course, George is never going to do that. We've already established his feelings about that. She's frustrated. She's like, "I need to go to the bathroom." So she has to go upstairs. And George stops her. "Well, what are you going to tell Jerry about the car?" "Well, why do I have to think of something?" And George says, "You can do it. You can think of something." Oh no, now she's got that on her shoulders. And then the scene ends with both of the men honking their horns simultaneously. All right, the purpose of the scene, we're heightening the George and Elaine plot and introducing the second phase of George's plot. And my take. Okay, so when George starts talking about what a great driver he is, and that he brags that he can make a left turn from the right lane and vice versa, I mean, wouldn't that make him a terrible driver? That's what I would argue. I've said before, I love the George and Elaine relationship. So this whole scene really shows why that is. You know, they go from arguing to laughing together within minutes. I mean, he's mad at her for moving the mirror. She accuses him of being a bad driver. They're clearly annoyed at each other. And then the parking conversation ensues. I love that he's sharing all these feelings with her about the parking and how he feels about garages. And then she makes him laugh with that little joke, you know, when she does see the space. This just makes the friendship feel so lived in. And that's why we love these characters. They have these lived in relationships. And I think that's such a key to, making a show successful. Okay, now George says, I wish you could make a living parallel parking. I believe he tried and miserably failed at it and pissed off Woody Allen in the process. But we'll have Sid to remind him of that. But yeah, that line was interesting to me where I'm like, I feel like Elaine would have brought that up. Didn't you try? And a whole bunch of shit went down. The whole confrontation with the other guy, you know, who's trying to sneak in. Well, it's Mike. We know that. But I mean, talk about swinging dicks all over the place. I love that Elaine is the voice of reason here. And she has to deal with these men and their fragile egos so much in this series. Oh, Elaine. And this whole setup, it allows for Elaine to be the one to come up with the explanation to Jerry, and it's gold. So let's move along to that scene. We're back in Jerry's apartment. Elaine enters out of breath. Her hair is messed up. She asks Jerry, do you have any Hennekins? Oh, you won't believe what we went through. He's concerned. What happened? Elaine pours what appears to be maybe a triple shot of Hennekins into a glass while kind of teasing like, oh, you won't believe what we went through. While she says that, she knocks this bag of pretzels off the counter that allows her to pour the Hennekins into the sink. And by the time Jerry looks back at her, it looks like she's taken a shot. And he just is like, oh my gosh. So she's really setting it up well here. And what she's setting up is this elaborate story, this wild pack of teenagers in a souped up convertible following them and taunting them after they paid the toll on the Henry Hudson Parkway. You know, George was trying to lose them. The car was on two wheels at some point. She was screaming, and George is such a fantastic driver. And she even says that they fired a gun into the air. A gun? I think it was a gun. And then they followed us into the city, and then they stopped, turned around, and went home. Well, Jerry's amazed. He gives Elaine a hug, asks if she's all right. Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, the car hit a pothole and it's making some clanking noise. Well, Jerry doesn't care, as long as they're all right. And yeah, that's what Elaine thinks too. Then Elaine tells Jerry that George is in front of the building arguing with some guy about a parking spot, and he can see it from the window. And Jerry goes to the window and says, George, crazy kids. What? Oh gosh, Elaine has to think of something. Ow! It's my cuticle. Then Mike starts calling for Jerry. George and Mike figure out that they both know Jerry. Of course, this has to be a competition too. George knows him way better than he does. Well, bully for you. Jerry says he's coming down, and Mike asks for Kramer. And George is like, you know Kramer too? Oh my God. Kramer enters. Ooh, he's pretty icy to Elaine when she says hi. She can tell something's wrong. He's not saying anything, just kind of sneaks past her, doesn't even want to touch her. Kramer tells Mike to come upstairs because the fight's about to start. And George's like, oh, you're going to be watching the fight at Jerry's? Mike says, Kramer, come on down here. So Kramer is on his way out, totally cold to Elaine again. Is something the matter? No, why would something be the matter? Jerry and Kramer exit, and Elaine goes to the bathroom. The purpose of this scene, Elaine's plot branches off into this lie that she tells Jerry about the car. And Jerry's story, it merges into the parking space plot. So we get that dovetailing. We also see Kramer's mini plot get some moments as well. And my take, well, this whole scene is a JLD gift. What can I say? I love how Elaine clearly came up with this scenario so quickly, and she knew she had to come in with a very specific emotion and also look. She definitely messed up her hair. She needs to pull this off, and she gives it 100%. There's so much that I love about her monologue, and I'll try to break it down. First, the physical bit of that faking the Hennigan's shot, knocking the pretzels off, the counter, dumping it in the sink. It's so well done. I love that. And then all the specifics of the monologue is great. You know me and specificity. And if you don't, I love specificity. Well, another thing I love to talk about is physicality. And even while pregnant, and I think she had to stay behind that counter because she's pregnant and has her belly. She has to hide the belly. JLD, she still assigns so many small but impactful physical moments to each part of the dialogue. She pretty much is standing still, but it's all face and hands and just, it's so well done. And this helps that monologue remain interesting and engaging because, talking about something exciting happen, it's never going to be as exciting as watching it happen or showing it. And obviously this is a lie, so they can't cut to a scene. So JLD has to really play this up, and she does it. Down to the last moment after she says the wild pack of teenagers went home with her mouth open. I think clearly Elaine ran out of gas with this story and just needed to end it. So that's how it ends. And then it's just so great. I love it. And then there's a rare hug we see. No hugging, no learning, but I guess they thought it was appropriate that Jerry would comfort Elaine in that moment. And that peek at Jerry after she casually mentions the clanking sound. Love it. Genius. And then her cuticle diversion is so stupid, but it's so believable. I mean, I think she's tapped out of ideas with the whole teenager car chase thing. And all she could come up with in that moment was, it's my cuticle. Hilarious. Kramer in this scene. It's so terrific. It's not often we see this side of Kramer. And I love the way Michael Richards plays this cold shoulder vibe here. It's so odd. And again, so believable as Kramer. I love that little shrug he does after Elaine asks if anything is wrong. He just kind of does this, whoo, it's such an interesting choice and one that only Michael Richards would do as Kramer. I think it's so brilliant. And this small detail, I just want to mention it. I love that Elaine does use the bathroom right before the scene ends. I mean, they didn't lose that bit because that was originally why she needed to go upstairs. It's nothing earth-shattering, but it's good attention to detail, so I appreciate that. The next scene, we're back down on the street. Mike says to George that he'll sleep in his car. George will die out here. And we see some people on the street. They're getting into this head first versus pulling in back. They're getting into the whole thing. So we're seeing those little conversations on the side. Jerry enters. Mike is so happy to see him. Jerry calls George Indiana. I think that's hilarious. And Mike tells Jerry he looks tremendous. I mean, are you on a regimen? And Jerry makes a really dumb joke about bran flakes, and Mike laughs so hard, like a phony, pretty much. And they start arguing again about this front first, backing in, blah, blah, blah. Kramer sides with Mike. Jerry sides with George. Elaine enters, and she pulls George aside, says it's all taken care of. I did a number on him. It was a thing of beauty. She tells George what she said, and he was so relieved we were okay. He could have cared less about the car. It's a gift. What can I say? Right after that, Kramer confronts George and Elaine about their flea market snub. And you see, Elaine really cares, and she really does feel bad. People forget. Look at Home Alone. And she genuinely apologizes. Kramer, I'm really sorry. George, he doesn't really see the issues. What is he supposed to do? Call everyone before he goes out to see if they want to go with him? And he's annoyed with Jerry, too. Why'd you have to tell him? So apparently it's everyone's fault except George. And he says, yeah, I'm sorry. Kramer, he doesn't care for that sorry. And Jerry agrees. It was a so sorry. The next thing we know, a truck pulls up and the driver yells that they've got to move those cars. He's got a truck full of ice cream. Purpose of this scene, we see all the storylines develop here. They've all converged together. And Kramer's plot pretty much gets resolved. He confronts George and Elaine. My take. Elaine is so proud, and I so enjoy when she and George band together, plot together. Plus, she's so pleased with herself, but, that doesn't stop her from throwing his own little boasting phrases in his face. Although, come on, George has that same quality inborn. She's talking to, the biggest liar, so his whole life is a lie. The Kramer confrontation, it's one of my favorite parts of this episode. I really feel bad for Kramer here. It's kind of touching how much this hurts him. I wanted to go back. In the last episode, I talked about how Kramer and George invited Elaine to come along to the Yankee game. And then the whole thing with the hat and Elaine needs to take off her Orioles cap. All that stuff happens. But I bring it up because I talked about in that episode, like how I think it was actually so sweet that they invited Elaine with them. So I have a theory based on nothing. I just have this theory that it was Kramer's idea to invite Elaine to that baseball game, which makes this snub very hurtful to him, especially when Elaine says, "Oh, we just didn't think of you." You got that right, sister. And there's this moment when you see Michael Richards, he's just kind of looking down, like staring at the street. It's not overdone. It's not overly emotive. It's just this guy who's really gotten his feelings hurt. Elaine trying to defend herself with the Home Alone bit is kind of funny. But, when she sees how much she's hurt him, I just love the sincerity of Elaine's apology. It rings true to me and her character. I think that Elaine would really feel bad. Now, juxtaposing that with George's apology, that's so perfect as well. I like that Kramer called him out and that Jerry agrees the quality of his sorry was terrible. And it's obvious he doesn't mean it. He deserves to be called out for his disingenuous apology. Also love that George calls on Jerry for having no judgment, but then he asks Jerry to judge the sincerity of his apology. So weird. All right, so moving on, we're still on the streets a little bit later. Elaine is explaining that the cars had to be moved because of that truck, but since they don't trust each other, they got a couple nonpartisan drivers to move the cars out, and now they're moving them back in. In the background, we hear all the clanking that Jerry's car is making, and Jerry looks at George and Elaine. Wild pack of teenagers, huh? It's interesting that they chose you out of everyone to torment. And right away, we see Elaine getting a little nervous. Yeah. I actually remember I said that. I said, why us? After a particularly loud clank, Jerry just says, "What'd you do to my car?" When George comes clean. It was Elaine's fault. He throws her under the bus. He said, "I thought you said you were a good driver." I never said good driver. I said I was a good parker. George and Mike get into it again about whether the cars were moved to their exact previous positions, more arguing about the car. And then Sid arrives. Sid, who parks the cars on the street and says, "Someone better move these cars." And Mike's like, "Well, who are you?" I love this. "Never mind who I am. I know who I am. Do you know who you are?" And then he asks George, why? Whenever you try and park a car in this block, something gets screwed up. Why don't you start taking the bus? And Jerry's had enough. "Look, I'm putting my car in a garage. It's my car. The fight starts in 2 minutes." And George stops him. Can't give up this spot. He cannot. Won't flip a coin. And this is about his principles. And he's taking a stand against all headfirst parking. We put up with too much crap in this city. And then Elaine has to point it out. And I don't think she's wrong here. Maybe if you didn't spend so long pontificating about what a great parker you are, you would have gotten the spot. Oh, so you're against me now. So we cut to a conversation between this little kid and an old man. They're arguing the same thing everyone else has been arguing. And the old man gets annoyed, calls him a little puke. He spits on him. "Don't you raise your voice at me. You're not my father." The kid walks away and Jerry approaches and says hi. And he asks, "Hey, how's your dad doing? I heard he's closing his store." Well, kid doesn't know that. "What? We're gonna run out of money? What?" And Jerry's like, oh God, no. The kid looks at his mom and says, "Mom, Dad's closing his store. Jerry told me." "Jerry?" So she's talking to Kramer. She turns to Kramer and says, "Jerry says some pretty stupid things sometimes." And then Kramer looks down at her belly and says, "Oh, congratulations." "For what?" "Oh, you're pregnant." No, she's not." "Are you sure you're not pregnant?" "Yes, I'm sure." And she tugs her son and they exit. Kramer then stumbles off the curb talking to someone saying, "I thought she was pregnant." Now, we're going to see this kid and the mother again in a future episode, the non-fat yogurt. So the kid's name is Matthew, and Matthew's mother is played by Mary Edith Burrell, and she was in the show Fridays with Michael Richards and Larry David. So a connection there from a while back. And she comes from Second City and the Groundlings, really classically trained actress and a lot of experience with improv and comedy. And I really enjoy her in this episode. And then also in the non-fat yogurt episode, she's really good. She's got these really short scenes, but she's like a really impactful presence. I think she's awesome. So the purpose of this scene, Elaine's storyline's kind of resolved here about lying to Jerry. He finds out the truth about his car, but the whole phony thing and the parking dispute stories continue. My take, I like the interaction between Jerry, Elaine, and George when Jerry is suspecting the wild pack of teenagers story may not be true. And it's clearly triggered by the clanking sounds that we're hearing. And then I just love the nervous Elaine short appearance. Yeah, I said, why us? Okay, then just some inconsistency here. George totally flips about his driving skills versus his parking skills. He says in the car to Elaine that he's a fantastic driver. So I feel like this should be brought up when he's trying to tell Jerry, no, I never said good driver. I said a good parker. I feel like this is a missed opportunity for Elaine to be like, no, you were yelling at me in the car that you're an amazing driver. Oh, I absolutely love that they brought Sid back to berate George. It's perfect. I mean, this is a parking issue on the same block that Sid parks cars. So it's perfect. And that aggression to Mike is also great. Just this grumpy old man. I love it. I know who I am. Kramer being embarrassed about his faux pas with, asking Matthew's mother if she's pregnant. I love that moment. It's pretty rare that Kramer gets embarrassed. So I like that moment where, again, he's not talking to anyone we see, but I thought she was pregnant and kind of stumbles off the curb. So great. All right, moving on later into the night on the street. Jerry, he's asking Elaine if she thinks he's a phony. And that's what Mike said about him. Elaine's like, what? She says she thinks he needs to say something. Doesn't matter that he told Kramer he'd keep it in the vault. He's got to open the vault. But then it ceases to be a vault. Well, you have to. You have no choice. We see Newman's out there. He's going on a passionate diatribe about how headfirst parking signals the breakdown in the social order, so on and so on. George applauds. Then an attractive woman approaches George and asks him what's going on. He explains what's going on, and she supports him. Don't let him get away with that. George is enamored, he thanks her for her support, and she also loves his hat. And Newman, you can see Newman approaching behind him and says, hey, George, I really like your hat. Can I try it on? And George keeps blocking him. No, Newman. He gets pretty aggressive with it. And then the woman asks, well, why won't you let him try it on? I don't want him to. He says it like a kid. And she's turned off. What is wrong with you? And she exits. And George blows up as she's walking away. You want to see? Takes off the hat, shows off his bald head. There. Then he turns and he's so pissed at Newman. He puts it on his head. Newman's kind of scared and hurt. I was defending your parking. The attractive woman who came up to George is played by an actress named Shannon Cochran. She is a classically trained theater actress and very accomplished in that theater community. Multiple starring roles and multiple awards won for her theater work. And I know you love it. There's a Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection here. She did appear in Gilmore Girls as a Chilton mother in one episode. It's the episode where Lorelai is guilted into becoming more involved in the school, so she joins the booster club. So Shannon Cochran plays one of those moms. Also in that episode is Brenda Strong, who will go on to play Sue Ellen Mischke. But I'm not going to get ahead of myself for that Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection, but just wanted to point that out. Another roundabout Seinfeld connection, it kind of comes back around with Shannon Cochran via The Office. So in that same Office Ladies podcast episode I referenced earlier, they actually discuss this actress, Shannon Cochran, because she appeared as Pam Beasley's mother in a very early episode, and she was unavailable to appear in the episodes that covered Jim and Pam's wedding. So that was what this podcast episode was covering. So anyway, they were discussing why Pam's mother was recast. And so it turns out Shannon Cochran was on tour, and the play was August Osage County. And that Pulitzer Prize winning play was written by Tracy Letts, who plays the counter guy at the off-track betting place where Elaine's fake number goes to. I mean, he's the one that goes to the Festivus dinner and tells Elaine her horse had to be shot, which is a big blooper moment, by the way. So anyway, there's just this roundabout way that all this comes back, but I just wanted to share all those connections. Those things excite me, guys. I don't know what to tell you. I enjoy Shannon Cochran's performance in this episode. She's very charming, and right away you can see the little connection with George until he acts like a brat. I love the way she delivers that. What is wrong with you? I think she's speaking for all of us when she says that to him. Okay, moving on, Jerry says, come on, the fight is starting. I'm going upstairs. Everyone can't decide if they're going upstairs based on who else is going upstairs. And Jerry slips. He says, if Mike's going, then he's not going. Then Mike asks, well, why not? Then there's a big lead up, like, you didn't call me a phony. Ooh, Mike is caught here and he's trying to save face. He's saying, no, it's slang. It's a good thing. And Michael Jordan, he's so phony. He blows up at Kramer. Why'd you tell him? He begged you. And then finally the cops come by and say, they have to move these cars. What's going on? It's George's space, tells Mike he's got to move his car. Well, but then the cop says, wait a second. And they have the same argument everyone else has been having. Oh, boy. The purpose of this scene, we see Jerry confront Mike. His plot is resolved now. He opened his vault and he confronted him. My take, I like that Elaine gives the advice to Jerry to confront Mike, even if it goes against the vault rules. We know Elaine would not back down from a confrontation like that. So she being the one to give Jerry the nudge to do it, it's very fitting. So I like that they made that choice. And I enjoyed that little break that George got from his parking dispute plot to have the moment with that woman. It brought back that earlier hat discussion with Elaine. So that's pretty clever writing. He mentioned it earlier in the episode about hats, and he wouldn't want to see the disappointment of a woman's face when he takes off the hat. So I like that we see that play out with this little moment. And then the last scene of the episode, Jerry is rushing in to hopefully catch some of the fight. We can hear George and Mike still arguing in the street. Turns out neither of them have jobs. They can stay there as long as they want. Jerry turns on the TV and the fight is over. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break and I will see you on the other side. To be human is to be beautifully flawed. So true. So true. But also, life is way too short to deal with dishonest people, Hi, I'm Jay Boogie Brooks, and I made a totally groovy thingamajig that'll help you weed out all the scuzz buckets in your life. Introducing the tie-dye lie detector, a surefire way to expel all the bummers from your life. The tie-dye lie detector is a stone-centered pendant that can be stuck directly onto someone's forehead. You will be able to tell within seconds if the person is all show and no go. For instance, a dude is saying sorry, and you don't care for his sorry. It's a so sorry. Whack the tie-dye lie detector onto his noggin, and you'll know for sure if he's being real. What if you gave some bitchin' hockey tickets to a friend and he's only thanked you once when, you need at least 4 thank yous for something that righteous? Yup, the tie-dye lie detector can help. And don't forget about begging. And sure, someone can say please and bend at the knees, but you'll need the tie-dye lie detector to know if the begging can be trusted. I know what you're thinking, how does it even work? The tie-dye lie detector uses mood ring technology and will change color to reveal truth or lie. The center stone will turn black when they are lying to match their black souls. But if they're being honest, you'll be mesmerized by an ocean blue color. 'Cause the ocean never lies, man. You can find the tie-dye lie detector at your local flea market. And for a limited time, my booth partner will throw in a pair of bejeweled cat eye sunglasses. Real boss. The tie-dye lie detector. Don't waste your time with phonies. Big phonies. Big. And we're back. There was an inside look for this episode, and Larry David talks about how this type of scenario with the parking space, it's an everyday occurrence in New York City. People argue over parking spaces because there are so few of them. And I wanted to mention some writing wisdom by Larry David. He talks about in the inside look how he likes to present both sides of the conflict, like in this episode, so that the audience will, they'll also be divided about who's right, who's wrong. As he's writing, he says he'll make sure one side doesn't have more logic or weight to the other side. And if it does, then he'll kind of take away some of that and put it to the other side. So it's really balanced out. So I really thought that was interesting and very clever. Also in the inside look, they talk about how they tried to do the outdoor live audience. So all those shots on the street, like I said, were shot actually outside. So they tried to bring in an outdoor audience, but it was a disaster, a failed experiment, as they said. because the actors couldn't hear the audience couldn't hear the actors. It just wasn't a good setup. With the commentary, Tom Sharonis and Tom Azzari were both the commentators. Tom Sharonis, of course, is the director. Tom Azzari is the set designer, I believe. A couple things they mentioned. Lee Ehrenberg, who plays Mike Moffat. I haven't talked a lot about him, but I think he is so funny and so fantastic. Just really fits in so well. He has a pretty substantial role in this episode. So for a guest star, he has quite a lot of screen time, and I think he nails it. And he apparently nailed it in the audition. Tom Sharonis said, we literally almost hired him on the spot. He was such a great audition, such a great actor. So, and I have no problem believing that. The ice cream truck driver is named Mike Costanza. And I just thought that was really interesting. Last name was Costanza. In the notes about Nothing, there was a quote from Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She says, "This is a show I'd watch even if I wasn't on it. What I like about Seinfeld is that it's a show about reality, not TV reality, but reality. As an actor, reality was a place I always wanted to visit, but I never expected network television to take me there." I just wanted to mention this. I love the quote. She's said similar things in other quotes, but man, I hope one day to choose projects based on my own enjoyment of what they are. I don't get a lot of say with the jobs that I get with a Lotto commercial or a corporate training video, but you know what? One step at a time. JLD also had a memory about a refrigerator mishap in season 3. She said it was stocked with food and they forgot to take the food out over the Christmas break. And the first day back to rehearsal was very nasty. Okay, I have experience with this, only it wasn't over a Christmas break. It was over like 3 months of hot summer weather. This friend of mine, it was a mini fridge, like the little ones you have in your college dorm. Well, she went away for the summer. She was living in a house off campus, but she was moving back in after the summer. Well, she kept a bunch of food in her little mini fridge in her room that by the time they all got back in like August, and August in Michigan is like, it's like soupy, it's like a mouth pretty much, super humid. So anyway, long story short, there were maggots. It was disgusting. We took the fridge out. We tried to clean it out. Like she wanted our help. And we're like, all right, we'll help you. I believe beer was involved too. We're like, we need to drink in order to deal with this fridge. We had to take it outside. It was so disgusting. And I remember my friend Matt dry heaving because when we opened it, you could not believe the smell. I can still smell it. It's so disgusting. Maggots. That's all I have to say. There were maggots crawling around in that fridge. Ugh. All right, moving on to Contributor Corner. Greg sent in some thoughts this week. He says, "This might be my favorite episode of the season. I love that Elaine and George are hanging out. That's always the best combo for comedy on the show. Even better, they're in together on a secret from Jerry. They go back and forth between bickering and laughing when they find a spot. I love their friendship. She hates him, but yet there are moments where she sticks up for him. I hate how long it takes George to back into the spot. It irritates me and he deserves to lose the spot, honestly." Oh, yeah. Okay, so we definitely agree on the friendship. And yeah, like you mentioned it too, Greg, how they can be laughing one minute and then hating each other another minute. Like that's just, I don't know. To me, that's the mark of a really close relationship. But yes, George, shut the fuck up and just park. I am kind of on Mike's side here. If he's just sitting there, and they never mention if he's put on his signal, right? So I think George is in the wrong. I haven't made that clear, my opinion clear about this yet, but that is my opinion. Next, Greg says, "I really like the guy who plays Mike. He flies off the handle and it works in this situation where George is already at a 10. Man, that Michael Jordan is so phony. It makes me laugh every time." Yes, Lee Ehrenberg as Mike Moffat. So good. And we'll see him again in the Susie episode. Greg goes on to say, "What works best in this episode for me is that it all takes place seemingly in real time, and the entire foursome is pretty much in the same place together, going back and forth between their side conversations. I also like how other side characters like Sid and Newman make appearances. Yeah, I'll speak a little bit more about this in my final notes, but I definitely agree with that. And to speak specifically to what you said, Greg, I mean, it really always works so well when all four of them are together, and even if they are kind of off having side conversations, there's almost a comfort when they're all together in the same setting. I really love that. And Greg's final thought, JLD deserves an Emmy for her telling of the story to Jerry about the made-up pack of teenagers and the damage to the car. It's so over the top, and the fact that Jerry is so worried about their safety that he doesn't mind the damage at the end. I love how proud of herself she is when she reports back to George. All in all, a great episode for her and for everyone. Yes, I agree with all of that, Greg. I'll speak more about that in my final notes. Thank you so much, Greg, for sending in those thoughts. If you would like to send in thoughts, either a voice recording or an email, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. All right, moving on. My favorite Elaine moments. It's easily the scene where she tells the story to Jerry about the car chase. And within that scene, sort of a favorite within the favorite, that look back at Jerry to see if he bought it. I love it. And then I have an honorable mention for my favorite Elaine moment. It's not necessarily any comedy that she's doing, but I love Elaine's reaction to Kramer's feelings being hurt. And full disclosure, I'm a little emotional and PMSy right now, but it's really touching to me. Okay, I'll just move on from there. Okay, so my final notes. This episode is very balanced for the main four. Everyone gets solid screen time, solid comedy, really well done. And I did notice a common thread through the episode, and I'm calling it the getting caught moments. So Elaine gets caught lying about why the car is clanking. Mike gets caught calling Jerry a phony. Kramer gets caught falsely identifying a pregnancy. Jerry gets caught divulging to a kid that his dad's store is closing. George, I guess, gets caught being bald, I suppose, or that he's a bad driver or parker, one of those things. And Elaine and George get caught leaving Kramer out from their flea market trip. So it's like everyone's finding out and catching other people in lies or snubs or whatever it is. So that I like that there's kind of this theme. I'm not sure if it was intentional, but we had a lot of examples of this type of stuff happening in the episode. Julia Louis-Dreyfus gets so much comedy in this episode and quite a range of emotions to play with, too. And she shines with all of it. And it's also such a treat when she's paired up with George. I've said it before. And they have their own side story. It's just gold. It's gold, Jerry. And once again, I just want to compliment the writing of this episode. It's structured very well, where they have the central conflict about the parking space, but we see these side stories happening, kind of similar to what Greg was talking about. There's Sid coming up, there's Newman with his little monologue, Matthew, the little kid, and his mom, the whole phony confrontation, Kramer being left out. Like there's all these little pockets of stories, but the background is just this parking space dispute. So I think that's such a clever way to structure an episode, and it's done so well. So all in all, a very strong episode, and I enjoyed being reminded of how funny it is. I don't watch this one very often, but it's a very funny, very solid episode. And that's all I can say about the parking space. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. And you better not be on your phone in the front row of a plane.